There, Uniwarriors, EnnuiGoblin here, once again bringing to you the latest in Uniwar action. Now, I just want to bring up a couple of things before we get this video underway. Number one, yes, I know there's been quite a lapse in the last 2 weeks of having no videos on the channel. I was called away out of state to deal with some pretty severe personal issues. It's taken me some time to get things under control, but I'm finally back home. I'm ready to restart this channel up, so expect to see more videos with a higher frequency rate in the future. Another thing, you will probably also notice that there was some artwork done for the channel icon. I just want to make sure that the artwork is credited to the very talented Katie the Moo. Link to her DeviantArt page on the description area below. I just want to make sure she gets credit. I really like the image. I think it fits the gamer tag I have for the channel very well. The last thing I want to talk about, I think I may have mentioned this before, at least I have in the chat rooms, that I'm working on currently a side project for this channel in which we're going to be developing tutorials. I'm working with some of the higher ranked players in the games to try and put together a couple of different videos based on different subjects and different types of problems players seem to be running into the games, and ways to approach those problems and solve them in a constructive way. What I was hoping I could get from you guys is what kind of scenarios do you find you run into that you would like to see a tutorial video based on? The very first one we're going to be doing is going to be based off of opening strategies, and I've got a couple of ideas for other ones, but what I'd really like to see is for some of you guys to post ideas in the comment section below on different subjects you'd like to see in the upcoming tutorial series. So, with that all the way, we've got a very exciting game for you today. It is going to be Needle versus Fobos for the May Championship final match. I'm really excited about this game. There's going to be once again, going to be very high-level play. This is an interesting map to see it on, and just let's take a look at this map real quick before we get started. It is going to be a Sapiens versus Titans match, and I'd have to say, on a map like this map is called Olympus Mons. And it seems to me that there would be a slight advantage to the Sapien player on a map like this, considering how open it is. You see those the outer three rings are a little bit more open, and then you have those closed two circles of swamps and mountains in the center. And also considering the income on this map, you start with 150 credits, 75 credits per base per turn. So that gives you a maximum of, I believe it's 350 credits per turn. No, sorry, 300 credits per turn once all the bases on your side have been captured. So I think in the early game, the Sapiens and the Titan player would be able to pump out Marauders and Speeders at about the same frequency, but as you approach the mid to late game, you're going to be able to see the Sapiens possibly pull on a slight economic advantage. So I think the mid to late game is going to favor the Sapien player over the Titans. The other thing to consider is I think when looking at the maneuverability of the Marauder on a map like this, yes, the Speeder has a high initial mobility count, but the fact that the Marauder can move on to one of those swamp tiles and then take a second turn and move again through the center or move around those hill tiles, I think the mobility is going to favor the Sapien player a little bit on this map. And there's not as much space. The map's a little bit too open-ended for the Titan player to really get a good defensive perimeter and really push back the Sapien offensive. So it's going to be a really interesting match. I'm very excited to see how this goes. So without any further ado, playing on the left-hand side as the Black Titans, the #1 championship ladder player in the world, it's Phobos. And on the right-hand side, playing as the Yellow Sapiens, the #7 championship ladder ranked player in the world, it's Needle. Without any further ado, let's get this game underway. Phobos now going to be taking that mecha and making the obvious central base capture, opening up with mecha up at the top there. Expect to see a Speeder from him on the second round. Needle now going to be also taking that first base capture, opening up with a Marauder up at the top. A Marine also coming up on the bottom, taking advantage of that second round economic boost. Speeder now coming up from Phobos in the center, going to be bringing up that mecha. And I just want to take a look at this position. This is a great opening maneuver from Phobos because it puts pressure on Needle on terms of that middle base there, because that Speeder can easily move up, cap that base, and then that mecha from the central ring can easily move its way forward and threaten a base capture. So now Needle's under pressure to keep that base from getting a cap on it. Needle now going to move his Marauder up into that base to prevent that base cap from Phobos occurring, putting pressure on Phobos now from the bottom. Needle's now threatening that bottom base. The speeder now going to be taking a 5-shot out of that Marauder, taking advantage of the fact that Needle has to keep it on top of that base and take a defensive negative boost. Now Phobos being forced to warp out his mecha onto the bottom so that Marine can't get an early base capture, but that mecha now is going to be the cost of it, and it looks like Needle's going to get an early game credit advantage here. There's 100 credit advantage to Needle, and now Needle putting on a very good. This is one of my. This is a fantastic example of using pressure against pressure instead of Needle trying to get too defensive against those speeders in the center. He's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on Phobos on that bottom hand base, and now Phobos, who would like to focus on that central base, is going to have to divert resources away from the central rings in order to prevent Needle from getting an easy base capture on the bottom area. Getting a cap from Needle now on that base, and now Phobos has no option but to divert his speeders away from that central position in order to avoid losing that early base in the early rounds of this game. Phobos now going to have to use his speeder to try and eliminate that Marine so that the base capture threat is completely eliminated. Second speeder into there, now going to have to move towards that Marine. And it's not only has Needle managed to pull Phobos out of position, but he's also put Phobos in a position where his speeders are now being damaged as a result. So not only are his speeders out of the way, but they're also damaged. And Needle is still able to keep a full health Marauder on top, capping that bottom region. Needle now moving up his Marauder is going to try and eliminate that mecha on the central area base, bringing that Marauder down to a 5 health, but also bringing let's just take a look at the critical kill count score here. Here on round 4, we are at I think it's now 200 to 100 in Needle's favor. Needle now getting a 2 health heal on that middle Marauder, a second one with that Engineer, bringing it back up to full health, bringing up his Marauder now to continue the pressure on these speeders. Needle's realizing now, if I can just continue this credit rather than try to force a base cap, he says, let me use this position to try and force an economic advantage and just pull ahead in that credit count early up in the game. Phobos now having a lot of pressure, going to have to fire back as hard as he can and try to, if he wants to pull back into this game. Getting a 3-shot on that central Marauder. Is that Marauder going to go down this turn? I believe it will, to that 7, and that 7 speeder is going to take out that Marauder in the center, and Phobos going to even up the credit score a little bit here. But is Needle going to be able to keep pressing this advantage? Those 2 speeders have a little bit of damage, but they're not quite as bad as they were in the position last turn. Needle now moving his Marauder up into the center and Engineer up with it, so that if those that Engineer push with that Marauder puts those speeders where the speeders have to eliminate the Marauder on the same turn. Otherwise, there's no advantage to attack in the center anymore. That Marauder now going to continue to aggravate and threaten base capture position on that base on the center. And once again, Phobos is in a position where he'd rather attack in the center, but instead has to go back to that bottom left base and prevent the base capture from occurring. More pressure coming from Needle into the center with another Marine heading in that direction. Phobos now taking a 4-shot on that Marine, and that Marine will go down this turn from the other speeder here. Is the speeder going to take damage from that shot? No, it's going to get away with a 0 shot, so that Marine does go down, but once again, the speeders are just not in a position where Phobos wants to keep them. That mecha now trying to lend support and position to these speeders. Another speeder coming on the board for Phobos. And another mecha coming for Phobos as well. Needle now moving that Marauder up into the center. Where's that Marauder going to go? It's going to take another shot at this mecha. That mecha going to take a big 7 shot from that Marauder there. Marines now moving up and going to continue to just press Needle continuing to press this really aggressive game against Phobos, not wanting Phobos to get a foothold at any position in this map. Phobos taking another 3 damage on his speeder. The Marauder is going to move up, take a second shot on that speeder, bring it down with a 2-shot to, what is it, 2 health, and that speeder is going to go down this turn to that last Marauder. And now Needle once again pulling ahead in the credit advantage. Getting a +1 heal on that Marauder. The Marauder has done its work. The speeder has gone down. The Engineer now threatening a base capture in the center. Is Phobos going to be able to repel that? I think he will. And if we just take a look at the credit advantage, the advantage is now 450 to 800 here on round 7 to Needle's favor. So Needle has put himself in a position where he's got a 350 credit advantage, a base capture threat on the middle. So I think Phobos is in a lot of trouble here, and I think Needle's early aggression really paid off. He was able to pull Phobos out of position in the early part of this game, got a credit advantage from it early on by pulling Phobos out of position, and has just managed to do such a good job of pressing his advantage as this game continues. Phobos now desperately moving his mecha into the center, trying to keep that Marine from getting any further walk-in. The Marine now brought down to a 2 health. The other speeder here going to try and take out this Marauder. Is the Marauder going to go down this turn? I think it just might from that 7. No, it's going to take a 3-shot and still have a remaining health, and that means that Needle is going to successfully keep that base capture with the Engineer in the center. Phobos deciding he would rather try and even up the credit advantage and delay Needle's win as many turns as possible to give himself a chance to win in fewer rounds on the next game. So now it's just a war of attrition for Needle. A war of attrition for Phobos. How many rounds can he delay the win from Needle? There's simply no way after that base capture that Phobos is going to take this game. But I think with some careful play, Phobos can still really delay Needle's advantage here. Mecha Marauder here taking care of that, wiping out that last mecha on that mountain tile, and now Needle in a great position, but he's going to have to really try and he might have to retreat here a little bit, do some healing, and then press a second wave of attack, and that could cost rounds, which could become a problem in the following game. Once again, in these tournament games, every single round is of critical importance. We now see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Marauders on the board for Needle. Needle now drawing in an advantage of 375 to 225 credits per round of income. The mecha now wiping away that last Marine up at the top row. The mecha at the bottom moving up to try and defend that base from any Marauder aggression. And another speeder coming up on the board, and now it is 5 Marauders to 4 speeders, though the Marauders have a little bit less health, but the speeders are all kind of out of position. The Marauders are very well grouped up together so they can move in and move back from striking very quickly and get a lot of gang up bonuses on these speeders. That 4 health speeder is going to go down, and that's going to be a big loss for Phobos. Phobos needing every single unit he can get his hands on at this point. And these Marauders are just kind of going to waltz around, try and get health. An Engineer coming up on the board to get very fast healing ability for all of these Marauders. That 6 Marauder going to get a 4 health and bring it back up to a full health immediately. That 2 Marauder going to be brought up back to a 6 health Marauder. And I think the Engineer, a very good decision from Needle right now. It's exactly what he needs to make sure that his advantage is maintained as heavily as possible. Yet another Marine coming up on that forward middle base from Needle. Phobos now going to swing his. I just want to take real quick a look at the credit count here because we are on round 9. On round 9, we are now at 800 credits to 1,250 credits in Needle's favor. So Needle now pushing up that economic advantage, that credit kill advantage to 650 credits gap, not to mention the additional 75 credits that he's earning versus the 75 credits that Phobos has lost. So the question is, how many more rounds can Phobos really hold out on this game? We're on round 9 here, and I would like to say that Phobos could probably push this up to maybe another 5 to 7 rounds if he's really, really careful. Or maybe if Needle makes a slight error, he could push it as high as round 17. I don't think it can go that high though. Let's see how it goes up here. That Phobos swinging up his speeders up to that top, trying to catch that 6 health Marauder, while it's not quite so well defended from the other Marauders. Bringing a 5 health, though, just not able. Is that last speeder going to be able to swing up in there? I think it will, and that last speeder is going to be able to get a kill on it, and that's going to bring the Marauder count back down to 4 as opposed from 5. Even with that, but with that engineer, those 4 are just a little bit more potent with their ability to heal so quickly. Another speeder coming up on the board for Phobos. That mecha on the bottom just going to get a heal, just continuing to try and defend that bottom base. Needle now bringing out his Marauders to get attack position, taking a 2-shot at that speeder at the top, moving back the 5 health Marauder. The engineer moving on to the tile, to the mountain tile in the back. A second engineer coming up to really give 4 health healing potential to some of these Marauders here. And now Needle is just going to be able to do so much damage to healing ratio that is going to be just an unstoppable Marauder line. The 10 health Marauder now going to be able to finally finish off that last speeder on the far right there. That speeder does go round, giving veterancy to that 10 health Marauder. That's a really dangerous Marauder to have veterancy, a full health 10 Marauder with veterancy, and with only 3 Marauders with 3 speeders left on the board for Phobos. Phobos in a lot of trouble here. Another Marauder coming up on the board from that forward middle base. Phobos once again going to swing down these speeders, and Phobos just figuring at every point of damage that he can do against these Marauder line is going to delay Needle a little bit more. So Phobos, instead of playing defensively, is trying to take the offensive and thinking, kind of working off the assumption that if he can get rid of that veterancy, and that veterancy Marauder is going to go down, that's actually a very good that's definitely an advantage in Phobos to be able to delay the game a little further. We are here around round 10 here. Needle now bringing up his Marauder, going to try and dissolve what's remaining of this speeder group up on the far right top area of the base. 6 health, going to take a second shot at that Marauder, that speeder. The Marauder doing a 2 health exchange on it. The 10 health Marauder now coming up on that swamp tile, going to manage to get a 3 shot on that speeder, taking a 2 against itself for the swamp defensive damage, but that speeder does finally go down, and now only 2 speeders remaining for Needle, one of them only at half health. We have a Marine coming up on that forest tile, going to get a very nice 4 shot on that speeder, and that second speeder is going to go down, and that is going to be a big dissolve against the remainder of Phobos' defensive troops. The last 8 health speeder now taking a 2 shot against it, and I'm wondering how much health with these 2 combined, that's going to bring that Marauder up to a 9 health with those 2 engineers, and the 9 health Marauder should be enough to do almost all the damage, getting a very nice gang up shot on it for a 3-shot damage, and that speeder will probably go down next turn. The engineers moving along with the Marauders to make sure that the Marauders can be quickly healed each turn. Another Marauder coming up at the top from Needle. And if we just take a look at the credit kill count, here on round 11, at the beginning of round 11, we are now at 1,300 to 2,000 in Needle's favor. Needle once again pushing up that credit advantage to 700, and just, I mean, if Phobos had been able to hold on to that base in the center, this would be a completely different game. But I think with that, we're going to see the win come here very quickly in the next couple of rounds. Needle's going to have to start pumping out Marines soon if he wants to get these base captures as quickly as possible. But I think that Phobos is starting to run out of steam here. That last speeder is going to go down this turn. The 1 shot coming from the 5 health Marauder, and then, oh, sorry, Phobos was the one who did the shot there. I got a little confused after I paused it. We do see a plasma tank coming up, and that plasma tank is actually going to be very effective in kind of slowing down Needle's advance here, because these Marauders are not going to be very effective against that plasma tank at all. But Needle's in a position where he can it's not too difficult of a task for him to just bring out a rocket. And those rockets can easily just that artillery will be really, really easy for Needle to defend, while Phobos has no offensive units to speak. The Marine now moving up to that top base, going to threaten a base capture. These Marauders now moving up towards the left-hand side of the map to really continue the pressure on Phobos here. making sure that Phobos can't advance that tank too far and maybe destroy that Marine next turn while it's trying to eliminate the base, while it's trying to do a base capture. Another Marine coming up on the map, a second Marine coming up on the map, and now here is Needle's push. Instead of, he's starting to pump out those Marines so that they can start making pressure on that top and that bottom base from Phobos. Phobos now building out mechas to try and slow the advance of these of this Marine Marauder line here. These Marauders going to do a lot of damage against those mechas, but the mechas will slow them down at least for a turn or two, so they are going to be able to do their job for Phobos, at least in the terms of delaying tactics. Needle going to take a 4-shot on that mecha on the bottom. The 9 health Marauder now going to take a being up bonus and eliminate that, but the base is not going to be capped by those Marauders. Marine now moving up and next threatening a base capture next turn on that base. The 8 health Marauder now moving up in front of that Marine, going to eliminate that other mecha there, kind of in a dangerous position because that plasma tank can take a pretty big chunk out of it. I think that plasma tank and that mecha combination will be able to take out that Marauder, but Needle's kind of in a position where he can afford to lose that Marauder if he gets a positional advantage. And that Marauder is going to move back anyways, kind of out of harm's way, so it's no longer as big a problem. The other Marauder from that far right top center moving towards far right top area, moving towards the center of the base. Base capture now coming from Needle on that top left base, and that's going to really put Phobos continually in more hot water. Here on the beginning of round 13 now, we are 1,300 to 2,450, and this is where you're going to see Needle really just start to steamroll, and the battery has come out for Needle, and this is exactly what he needs, and this is what I was saying earlier. That plasma tank is out for Phobos, and it can do a couple of delaying tactics, but with the battery, I mean, the battery can take at least a 3-shot this turn, maybe even a 4 or 5-shot next turn. And Phobos doesn't have anything to attack this battery, so the battery has a lot of free range of motion. Typically when you're playing against a Titan player, a battery can be risky because those speeders on a map like this, because the speeders can kind of move around and get a lot of shots at it, but there's no speeders on the map, so that battery has so much free range to just do a lot of aggravation, and it's going to be a great counter against that remaining plasma. Another 2 mechas coming up on the board. Phobos desperately trying to repel this onslaught of Marauders, but the Marauders on the bottom are going to be able to do just enough damage to eliminate it. The third base capture from Needle now coming up on that bottom, and Phobos now taking his last stand here, trying to delay every turn. Can he get 2 extra turns out of this? He just might be able to. The battery going to, instead of taking a shot at the plasma tank, instead taking care of that mecha on the base. The other Marauder now going to be able to cap the base, and now the engineers and the Marines are moving towards, and that plasma tank, though able to do a lot of damage, is not going to be able to eliminate that Marauder. The battery now taking a 4-shot at that plasma tank. The Marine moving up here, trying to eliminate it as fast as possible. Can he eliminate it this turn? No, he's not going to be able to eliminate the tank this turn, but with the second battery up on the map, next turn, that plasma tank will go down, which will be a GG here, I think, on turn 15. So it looks like, wow, it looks like Phobos was actually able to get that second round at the end there. Instead of making this a 14-round game, it's going to end up being a 15-round game. That plasma tank now going to be taking shots against that top Marauder, but these batteries going to wipe it out real quick. Second battery takes a shot. The plasma tank does go down, and that, in fact, will be a GG in Needle. Needle taking this game in 15 rounds. Really well done game here. Now, I just want to look at the way this game was played. I think what really put Needle in an early game advantage, if we look way back here at the beginning, Needle really took advantage of what I was saying about maneuverability for Sapiens on a map like this. Because if you look, Phobos pulls his mecha speeder opening here on the center. And then that puts a lot of pressure on the center from Needle, because Needle doesn't have anything to Needle can't push this Marauder up at the top towards the top left base because it's pretty well defended against the speeder and mecha combo. But Needle does see that this bottom left base is left pretty exposed. And because he's already and he takes advantage of the fact that he gets the second turn, so he gets the credit boost at the beginning. So instead of having to go Marine and then Marauder on the next rounds, Needle was able to go Marauder Marine right away, and then with that Marauder at the top, Needle was able to defend against this early game pressure that Phobos was trying to put us on that center base, where Phobos wasn't able to get the early game base capture. I mean, he did get a pretty decent shot against that Marauder, but immediately, instead of acting defensively, Needle went very well on an offensive return and instead brought his units into the bottom left portion of the base and put Phobos in a pretty precarious position where Phobos set himself up for a central game attack, which is great, but because that base was left exposed, if Phobos was in a position where now, after he spent the first 2 rounds really gearing up for a center attack, he has to switch gears. He has to take away from his focus on, instead of getting a chance to eliminate that Marauder, which would have been a huge early game advantage for Phobos, Phobos doesn't get to eliminate that Marauder and instead has to divert all of his resources away from that Marauder to eliminate a Marine instead, damaging his speeders in the process and eliminating and undermining his offensive position in the same turn. So I think that's what really put Needle in the win in this game. And then the dominoes kind of fell from there because Needle, he didn't get so much a credit advantage because I think here on turn 4 they were 100 to 100, but he got a positional advantage, and that was far more important because the main advantage being, I would like to point out that Marauder in the center wasn't able to go down because Phobos couldn't use his speeders to eliminate it. So this was a fantastic played game. I really enjoyed it. Phobos also, I would like to mention, did a really good job of using this plasma tank here to delay the game an extra turn. I think a more inexperienced player might have panicked and thought, if I can bring out more speeders, like another speeder and maybe another mecha, I can do more offensive damage against these Marauders. But Phobos does the smart play and saves up. Instead of spending every turn, he realizes that spending is a game that's just going to lose, and instead says, let me save. I'll sacrifice the position, and in exchange, I'll get a plasma tank, which I can use to delay the win from Needle for at least another turn in the late game, which is exactly what happened. Because if you see up here, Needle does get a battery, but he was put in a position where he could have gotten the battery earlier, but he went very Marauder heavy, and so he didn't have Marines right away. So he had to, a turn that he could have used to get an earlier battery, he used to get the Marines instead, which is fine. He needed those Marines to get the base captures. But so because this plasma tank was out here and because the battery had to come out and a second battery had to come out on turn 14, instead of the game being ended on round 13 or 14, the game was ended on round 15 instead. And I think that plasma tank is exactly the reason that Phobos was able to buy himself an extra turn. So both players just really shining out very good strategies considering the situation. I'm very eager to see how the next game is going to play out. So that's all we've got for this game, guys. This is EnnuiGoblin signing out.